What if I told you that everyone is actually wrong about Hexed? When I say that, I don't mean that the criticisms towards the trailer are wrong, but rather that everyone is wrong for stopping there. No one is talking about the root of the problem, or the core of the issue that is responsible for everything that we're seeing, and why we as the audience feel the way we do about this trailer. Though the conversations about AI are important ones to have, people don't seem to realize that by starting and ending the conversation there, it actually helps Disney. In a sense, it buries and distracts. We're actually deflecting how humans are responsible for this, because people then start correlating Disney's current struggle to the advent of AI. It gives the impression to the general public that this is just something that happened overnight because of AI, when in reality, this snowball has been rolling down the hill ever since Tangled. And then the story is just, no internet, Disney's new movie isn't AI forever, instead of the actual story here. I have seen hundreds of posts like "this looks like AI" for sobbing emojis, but not a single one talking about how Walt Disney Animation is having their own creative officer battle royale at the moment. Of course, I knew that, and I'm sure that some of you do too, especially if you're here. But what about your mom, or your cousins, or your classmates, or your math teacher who are only seeing Twitter's finest dunks? This discussion is going to be an endless samsara. The internet says yes, Disney says no. The snarky articles talk about how the internet is accusing Disney of using AI when they haven't, and the real problems will just get swept under the rug. I don't know if you guys can tell, but I'm just a little tired. And so if you are too, this is Calxiyn here to give you the answers that you've been looking for and make you care. Because it is always that deep and it is fun to talk about why. I promise this video was more than just discussing the trailer, but in order to talk about the why and the how did Hexed even get to this point, we do need to talk about the what. Like, I do want to talk about the criticisms that I have, what the internet is saying, why people feel like there's something vaguely wrong with the movie that they can't put their finger on, because it all trickles down, right? It's all relevant for our discussion of those core issues. The best way I can describe my first impression is that I feel like I'm watching another cartoon, and in universe they're showing a trailer for a movie that doesn't exist. It is painfully generic. And of course, if you dare to say that, Disney writers will pop out of the woodwork like, you can't judge the movie yet, it hasn't released, it's not fair. But this is what is supposed to convince us to spend our money. Much like the opening number to a musical, the trailer is also a type of promise to the audience, a promise on what we're going to see and why it's worth paying for. I think it's perfectly fair to judge how this trailer fails at doing that. And even though we can say that nothing is truly original, I feel like people only whip out that argument in defense of Disney when they're trying to avoid engaging with what people actually mean when they say they want something original, which I think is really fresh. People seem to think that whatever is going on with Hexed is the equivalent to like Disney retelling fairy tales. But The Little Mermaid didn't have a dramatic drag queen-inspired musical theater diva in its original text. I don't know how many times the mythology surrounding Hercules has been retold using gospel music, but I'm guessing it's not that many. Though a lot of the secret sauce that older Disney movies have can be found in its musical elements, even Disney's non-musical movies have this angle or twist, if you will. Think Treasure Planet or Lilo and Stitch, not just in how it uses our expectations about, say, monster or alien movies while challenging them, and also pulling from, like, I don't know, like, Feel Good, what's the, like, the Snow Buddies or whatever, the movie about the dogs, I don't know what genre that is. Anyway, it's not just in that sort of synthesizing. They also gave us the sauce in the very creative marketing that they did. And I think that synthesize is really the key word here. Like, it feels like in present day, Disney would look at something like, say, Fillmore, which I think is a very smart, very well-written show that I binged recently, and I feel like Disney would go, oh, it's popular because it's set in a middle school, or come to some other bizarre, out-of-touch conclusion, without realizing that what makes it fresh is police drama set in middle school, that it's not a middle school show or a police drama show, but both of those things, and that it covers problems that kids can relate to while also having the same witty writing as adult cop shows. The problem isn't inherently we've been here before, because humans love and seek a lot of comfort in things that remind us of other things that we like. As long as those things, though, are in the same quality range or better. But Hexed looks worse. Just like Wish was worse than the other Disney movies that it was trying to emulate, and also the other Disney parodies that already exist. It is we've been here before, and you will spend this entire viewing experience thinking, this just makes me want to watch better thing I already like instead. Probably the Owl House, and the Owl House fans, by the way, they are super mad about all this. That's a conversation for another day, I think. Somehow I've heard these jokes before, but they are also worse. These guys are literally rejected Beauty and the Beast characters, which I think is hilarious. And because of Disney's sidekick problem, which I will hopefully make a video about someday, they're not gonna be nearly as funny as Mr. Cog's
If it's not broke, don't fix it.
worth. Disney just doesn't really write that sort of humor anymore. We have a similar adorkable personality type that Disney has been copying and pasting ever since Tangled, even though the enlightened amongst you will know that adorkable is just a band-aid on top of a deeper problem, but this isn't even really dorky in an endearing way like Rapunzel or Anna. You guys can tell me where you think it started, but I feel like at least with Asha, it started to like mutate into pathetic. Everything that Billie did in this trailer reminded me of Asha somehow, especially before she's doing her job interview with the king, but just like in general. Many books or lectures by musical theater legends caution against pity, and I know that Hexed isn't a musical, and I'm not entirely sure yet if we should be saying thank God or oh no. But anyway, pity may seem like a shortcut to get us to root for a character, but the poor you of it all actually wears off pretty quickly. Compared to a character like Ariel or Mulan, who may fail, but at least we see them immediately fighting for or working towards what they want and taking action. It's like the difference between feeling bad because of what you're seeing, like secondhand embarrassment almost, versus feeling for a character the entire time, through their joy, through their pain. And pity is a poor replacement for true vulnerability, but see this video for more about that. Anyway, my first impression of Billie was that she honestly reminded me of those old edgy Tumblr edits of Elsa or Rapunzel, and the initial smug face that they released wasn't helping, but even in movement, like even though in the trailer she now looks a little less Elsa-y, she looks like someone stole a bunch of other Disney assets and renders and edited them together to try to make a fake 4chan leak. I don't know if you guys have seen these, but there's been this rumor that Disney is working on a Princess and the Pea musical movie lately, and like this looks like some bullshit that someone would make to report on that story without having an image. Do you guys know what I mean? But put a pin in that because we're not done with Billie's design just yet. The internet has also pointed out that all the shots are TikTok friendly, and at first I thought, well, hold on a second. This could be because they knew that they had to post it on TikTok, and so they chose TikTok friendly shots. Not that the entire movie is like this, as people are assuming, especially as someone who, like, that was what my degree was in, professional communications, marketing, PR, all of that fun stuff. That was my logic. But then a few other YouTubers chimed in to say that nearly all of Elio is like this. And even though I haven't seen it, I've seen people post clips of Elio to talk about what they mean, and then people are also putting this trailer beside the DreamWorks trailer, and you can really see the difference between the DreamWorks trailer and the Disney one. So make of that what you will, but this is also an important criticism that we have to circle back to. Again, even though I understand why people want assurance that this wasn't made using any AI, I think the more interesting conversation in that is that even when it's human-made, these stylistic choices are inheriting a lot of the negative feelings that people have towards AI. I don't want to get too deep into like the signifier and the signified and symbols and how we decode them and all of that sort of stuff, but at that point people are having a sort of uncontrollable emotional reaction based on what their brain has been trained on, which is to hate this on sight, because if you run into it on somewhere like Twitter or TikTok, I don't know, you're getting AI generated fucking Fruit Love Island or whatever's going on over there. Now for me, as someone who is too busy to spend a lot of time on social media these days and has also been pretty good at curating my feed so that sort of stuff doesn't happen, it looks less like AI to me and more like Despicable Me or like Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs, I guess, but even that signals to my brain, oh, this isn't Disney. And though I'd say that these criticisms only scratch the surface of why Hexed is giving people uncanny negative vibes, and I have a deeper theory, all of that is still valid. Part of what makes Disney so successful is that they sell a feeling, but this doesn't feel like Disney. It doesn't even feel like a parody of Disney. It doesn't even really feel like Pixar, really. Like, it feels like those old DVD movies that used to try to trick parents into thinking that, oh, this is actually a secret Disney movie that you didn't hear about. And I do have theories about what's missing on a storytelling level in terms of that angle or twist or synthesizing that I alluded to earlier, but until the movie comes out, we won't really know for sure. What I will say is whether this movie has the secret sauce or not, said secret sauce or whatever you want to call it doesn't seem to be very clear in the trailer, which means we're left with the generic everything else. So either it's not in there at all, which is bad, or it is in there, but for some reason they decided not to even hint at it, and that's not great. Now say hypothetically I was feeling generous. I'd wonder if maybe Billie is an arrogant person who thinks that she is better than everybody, because someone in the trailer went, oh, I'm so cool and alt, almost like Billie has acted that way before and that's why people don't like her. Like she has acted like she's so cool and everybody else is so lame, and so she ostracized herself in that sense. And I think a character who is a bully, gets magic, and then has their magic spectacularly backfire on them because of their own negative energy is actually, like, kinda interesting. Like, I think that's a kind of cool idea. Especially because a lot of magic has this, oh, whatever you send out, you're gonna get back tenfold, like that sort of thing, like in real life beliefs I get, like karma and stuff like that. But I don't think that Disney is gonna go there. If somehow I've missed a criticism that you or the internet has had, and it isn't part of one that I'm gonna circle back to now, let us crowdsource that in the comments. Please do let me know if you think that I have forgotten something. I did have a rant about Disney's Chosen One problem here, and how we keep seeing this character has always been perfect the entire time. They will not face consequences, and the movie will try to gaslight the audience into thinking a very obvious character flaw is no big deal, actually, and that everyone else is the problem, and that the family or friends that they've hurt just have to get over it. And how I think Billie is going to end up as one of those characters too, but I am trying to be fair, and technically that's not something that we can fully judge without the movie being out. But if you're interested in hearing my little rant, I'm gonna put it up exclusively for patrons and YouTube members. We'll see if I'm right in a few months, but don't worry, we will be talking about that in the Moana video that I'm working on for July, and so if you can't do Patreon, there will be a publicly accessible version of a similar discussion just buried in the Moana video, basically. At the beginning of the video, I said I was tired by the lack of depth in these conversations about the movie, but what is the conversation I think that we should be having instead? I feel like that no one is talking about how barely a year ago, the protagonist of this movie my finger on it feeling. The #1 complaint that I had seen even before the trailer, because they gave us these renders at some point, was why does Billie look so much older than her mom? Why does she look so much like Elsa, who is supposed to be, what, 24? When this character is in high school? Why does her mom look like an Illumination character? Or they don't even look like they're from the same movie. It's not just that, it feels like they're not from the same movie. In a sense, they're kinda not from the same movie anymore. And this isn't just about visuals either. It trickles down to the story as well. But to talk about the visual aspect first, I'm not necessarily claiming that all of these scenes were originally animated with the boy, or conceptualized with the boy in mind, and that's why they look off. However, what I am saying is that the most important characters, which would have been boy and mom, were certainly designed as a pair to balance each other out. That's just how it works. And to be clear, I am not a visual artist, I am a professional musical theater performer and songwriter. But luckily, I do have friends in this industry that I could ask, and they basically said I'm good to go here. So to put it simply, look at Maui and Moana, or Cusco and Pacha, Yzma and Kronk even, Jumba and Peekly, Timon and Pumbaa, to some degree, Belle, Beast, Genie, Aladdin, like these characters that spend a lot of time together. And you may be saying, but Cal, that's different. This is a parent and child. To that I say, look at Belle and Maurice, Sultan and Jasmine, Ariel and Triton. And my friends did point out that there is a conversation to be had here about like Disney going for a more realistic look and that impacting the like exaggerated proportions that they tend to give characters, or I guess not anymore, right? Like Elsa's parents look fairly human-like and all of that stuff, but like those characters aren't on screen as much as a duo would be. And even for Maui and Moana, like they still found a way to make it work, even though it probably isn't as exaggerated as like during the Disney Renaissance with a character like Hercules and Phil. So I guess that to say, even though Disney is doing this less goodly now, according to the friends that I asked, they are still like doing it. The original boy looked like he was going to be short and that his cape would have made him look either more like triangular or maybe like round, gave him a different shape in any case, and that the mom would be the tall, skinny one. But when you look at Billie and her mom, they are both tall. Both of them have a similar silhouette, even though it's not exactly the same. It is a little too close, I think, to be exaggerated. And then they are both given the Disney princess giant baby doll eyes, which Magnifico had these eyes too, and I'm still thinking about it. Like, when I lie awake at night, I wonder why they did that to him, because he was an old male villain. Does he really have to have those eyes too? But anyway, this woman should be 40 or 50, and so that's the other thing that's throwing us off as well. And think about how the difference in design between the boy and Billie would change the scenes that we're seeing in the trailer. Girl Billie can walk up to this table and look at the book no problem because she is taller. But if the boy was shorter and couldn't see above the table, he wouldn't know that it's an inanimate object talking to him. Like, I feel like he would be a bit more surprised. And it also would be a bit more cute and endearing to see him, like, stand on his toes to be able to see or something like that. That's just one hypothetical example, but you can see how that shot would inherently need to be different. And when you have a character who is smaller, the whole world seems bigger. Think of something like Zootopia, right? And you may be wondering, but Cal, why didn't they just like throw eyelashes and longer hair on the boy Billie model and call it a day? Like, this is a lot of extra work, right? But I'll explain it in a minute. Basically, I don't think they would have been allowed to make a female protagonist with the same proportions. And so because of that, you can see why changing the gender of the character is a big deal, because the gender change led to this radical design change, and that took away the built-in contrast that the protagonist had with their mom and the other characters. And it changes the way that the character moves in the world, how the character sees the world, the literal height that the character sees the world at. And I would also argue that on a story level, it trickles down into becoming a different movie. The characters and their relationships and their dynamics with each other and the world around them would have to be different. Especially because this is a coming-of-age story. Girls face different external and internal pressures compared to boys around this age, and it's not to say that those struggles are completely alien or incomprehensible to the other gender. They do share similarities, but they are different. Because even if we don't want to conform or the character doesn't want to conform, all those outside forces will be telling them how to conform, how to be a woman, how to be a man. You guys know what I'm saying? And remember that now instead of a mother-son relationship, it is a mother-daughter relationship. While mothers can say to their daughters, I was a teenage girl once too, you know, a single mother having to navigate a young boy becoming a man and what it means to be a man and all of those conversations is very different. You guys know that one of my favorite random quotes to throw out here when we talk about this stuff is the Aladdin, your father's a man who taught you who you are, mine was never there. I can't say that as a girl I ever felt that way. Adding on to that, it is also possible that the boy character did have long hair like Billie, or was emo like Billie, or painted his nails like Billie. But that reads differently on a boy compared to a girl. Because there is an element of gender non-conforming there that we lose when we do a gender swap. And I wouldn't be surprised if that was originally what they were going for, because that would actually be different. Like, within the Disney animated catalog, there's not really a leading man that would present that way. But if that was the intention and now we're here, inevitably the bullying and the outcast stuff is going to get watered down as well. Because now we don't have a boy who is genuinely rebellious and non-conforming to typical masculinity or whatever. We have like a carbon copy of the other Disney princesses. And by making her look that way, like the bullying is just a little bit harder to believe. Especially compared to the theoretical boy who would be easy to shove in a locker. I would maybe buy that people are afraid of Billie. At first, that's where I thought we were going with this, but it doesn't seem like it. Like a sort of, oh, I cut in front of Billie in the lunch line once and then all my hair fell out. Like that they think she's a witch, she doesn't think she's a witch because that would be crazy, and then we circle back to like she's had powers all along, she just wasn't consciously using them. And I'm not saying that pretty people don't get bullied, guys. Please don't cancel me on Twitter. But tons of popular girls I went to school with looked like Billie. Even dyeing your hair is so much more normal now than when I did it in high school and they thought it was like a cry for help or whatever. It just makes it clear to me that the minds of the creative team are stuck in 2012. Like they don't actually understand what makes you a magnet for bullying in 2026. I do think people would think that Billie looks cool. Remember that this is a story, and even though kids can be cruel to each other, like really randomly, this does not need to have real-life randomness. In fact, just because is less satisfying for the audience. And I guess what I have beef with is that they're not even talking about anything she's doing or the things that she likes, like, say, Belle when she's criticized by the townspeople. They're literally just talking about her clothes. What I will say is that, like, Billie looks relatively normal in the year of our Lord 2026. I don't know if kids would be bullied for looking like this these days. I mean, obviously it depends on where you live. And people who know a lot more about fashion and stuff than me are making that observation that they're only making her as weird or as alt as is socially acceptable. And so the audience of kids and teenagers this is supposed to appeal to are going to look at Billie and see that she's a poser instead of an outcast. It's not committing far enough to how people in those subcultures actually use clothing for makeup and self-expression, so it doesn't seem like she's actually part of like a fashion subculture that would be ostracized or still looked down upon. And with the boy character, I feel like this would have all hit harder, because then it wouldn't just be about how others treat him, but his perception of himself. Like maybe he made himself goth because he wanted to seem scary and unapproachable, kinda to make up for being short or whatever. And even if he wasn't goth at all and just like bullied for being a nerd, it's easier to show why a teenage boy who is very short and not as muscular compared to his peers, or a late bloomer in other ways, would be insecure. And how magic would help them discover the more important things in whatever, like being smart or kind, or those traits that Disney movies used to value, which they don't anymore, again, Patreon rant, but all of that just clicks together for me. I'm not understanding how this is clicking together with Billie. Alright, so for everyone that was thinking, Cal, why didn't they just slap long hair and eyelashes on the boy Billie design? Isn't what you're suggesting that they scrapped his design and made a whole new character model a lot more work? Here's the thing, I don't know if they're going to try to backdoor her in the Disney princess franchise, like she's a witch princess of this magical world or something, but often a female protagonist who is not in the Disney princess franchise will still have to obey Disney princess franchise rules. And I bring this up because that is the reason we are never going to see a short, rounder, chubby Disney princess. They most likely weren't allowed to design her to aesthetically look more like boy Billie because of toys. Did you know that Mattel makes the Disney Princess Barbies for Disney? It's kind of complicated, and there have been times where Disney has made dolls like for themselves, but as of right now, they do work with Mattel, and if you're a fan of the animated Barbie movies, you'll know that clearly there was a desire to give characters more unique body types or faces, but it always has to be the characters who will never get dolls made, which are usually the villains, because unique features mean unique molds, etc., etc. So when it comes to character design, or character redesign, I guess we can say, they are already locked in a formula because the silhouette that they give the character needs to be doll-friendly. As much as Disney loves to make parents spend money, they also practically know that parents are more likely to buy something for a mid or potentially a flop movie if their kids can at least use those toys with the other toys they already have. They're only gonna go out of their way to get toys that are not compatible with the toys that they have already if those toys are from a hit like Frozen and like Moana. And I don't think with Frozen and Moana they really deviated all that much anyway. Now that they're marketing this movie to girls, girls need dolls and dresses. Dresses that they can swap with their other dolls that they already own. Toys that work with the Disney princess playsets that they already have. It all needs to go together because whether they shove her in with the Disney princesses or not, there is still a safety net in like the illusion that she's like kind of a princess, right? And I would bet one of my toes that someone with sense probably was like, hey, if we're going with this design for Billie, we should probably redesign the mom. Maybe make her a bit more Sultan-like a Mrs. Potts type thing. Round, cute, maybe have her dress brighter, like in more clean colors like white or beige. I don't know, to give us some contrast. But that someone on high probably said, no, we're already spending all this money rewriting and redoing shit, and now we have to pay people to get toys into production, and so even though we all know that mom needs a redesign, leave that shit alone! I have a few videos discussing Disney's batshit production problems, so I won't rehash it too much here. Just know that it starts with Tangled, but even if you don't know about that stuff yet and you're gonna watch my video later, the Frozen 2 production documentary is probably like the most well-known example and a good place to start. Much of Frozen 2 was getting rewritten 4 months before the movie released. And on the Pixar side of things, Inside Out 2 also had major overhauls a year prior to release, and a few months before release, it was a very crunchy shit show. And after people were worked to the bone because they were told it was life or death, they got laid off. So I won't be surprised if we end up hearing that this movie in particular had crunch that goes beyond the power of our imagination. They at least have to change out boy Billie for girl Billie in the stuff that they've already done. But they are also, I hope, rewriting the script and the story to suit this new character and the different dynamic that she needs to have with her mom. But also, on top of all that, the entire target demographic has changed, which makes this completely different compared to Inside Out 2 or Frozen 2. Can you imagine how many things need to be redesigned or rewritten to suit this new demographic? Not mom, of course, because like how much do little girls care about having the doll of the mom? But I mean stuff like suddenly incorporating a cute animal sidekick that appeals to girls. Getting toys and dresses into production. Obviously, Disney is a business. There is always more than just the movie going on, but there is probably so much more not about the movie going on. Like, well, does Billie have multiple outfits we can sell? No, now we need people to go design and model them. Is this magic wand / carriage / whatever friendly for mass production? No? Well, make it simpler because it can't be too complicated or too imaginative or too cool because you can't make toys out of that stuff. And all that other annoying shit that now has to be considered. And to be perfectly honest, I do not know how much of this work would have already been started. Maybe luckily for them, you know, they made the change in time for all these other departments to do things, but it's also like the shit we don't think about, like stickers on bananas, you know what I mean? Or rewriting all the Disney books that tend to release at the time of the movies that also tend to come out too early and spoil the plot for what the movie's gonna be, but anyway. Have you forgotten that Billie also needs to show up in the Disney parks? That means making new guidebooks to train performers with. And though I'm leaning more towards that the boy Billie would have also been a face character because he probably would have been a teenager, depending on his proportions, it is possible that he was a fur character. So even though we don't know, that is the tip of the iceberg for the hypothetical stuff that could be in the bin. Jennifer Lee not knowing who was calling Elsa at the end of Frozen 2 4 months before release sounds like a cakewalk compared to this. And I honestly cannot wait to hear what happened behind the scenes here, because I think it's gonna be batshit. Which begs the question, why even change Billie in the first place? This is definitely going to cost some money, but even outside of the money, there will still be a cost. Like, I get it, if the story's not working, of course you have to do something, but this just seems like one of the most drastic measures that they could take. This definitely feels like the in case of emergency break glass sort of solution, as opposed to like just rewriting in the same way that they did with Inside Out and Elio, which obviously had different results. But I do think I have the answer. Or at least a reasonable theory about why. Obviously, much like things that we've already talked about, some of this is hypotheticals and speculation. But it is speculation based off of other research that I've done, particularly for these videos if afterwards you want to give them a look. It is based on interviews or stories from anonymous and not anonymous people that have been working quite recently on Disney or Pixar movies. And so until we hear otherwise, I do think that it is reasonable to assume that the problems from like a couple months ago are still the problems happening now. Is it more believable that history is repeating itself, or that some other unprecedented catastrophe has happened? Disney has a history of, let's say, having sudden bouts of panic about appealing to boys. We see this in how Disney tried to respond to Toy Story, and later on in the acquisition of Star Wars and Marvel, you get the idea. They have these cycles where it seems like suddenly they go, oh shit, we gotta make a movie for the boys, but then something just happens. A princess movie does poorly or gets mixed reviews, and that was supposed to be the guaranteed success, and so there's no way that now they can take a risk on a male-led animated movie. Or more mysteriously, there are ones that are announced, and then they just disappear for seemingly no reason at all that we know of. and then they don't try again for a really long time, and they outsource the boy market to the live action stuff or Pixar. Remember that we have heard Pixar leaders themselves basically say that Pixar is for the boys, and so it's not a surprise that Disney would sort of rely on them to be the boys' studio. Meanwhile, on the princess side of things, Pixar leadership like John Lasseter that came in around the time of Tangled wanted everyone on every level to ensure the princess movies were still appealing to boys and men. Hence the rebranding of Tangled and the emphasis on these duos. As opposed to something like, say, Aladdin, which yes, obviously has Aladdin and Jasmine, but Aladdin is also packaged with the genie, etc. You don't really see that with Maui, he's only really packaged with Moana. And Moana isn't packaged with anyone else either, mostly because the ensemble is either non-existent or just not interesting enough. And this is where I think things get interesting. Seemingly, after the success of Tangled and Frozen, someone was feeling like Disney was doing well enough to try to make a boy movie, hence Moana originally being Maui. There was also Gigantic, which we have never heard of again, and so on. But isn't taking that much risk unnecessary when instead of having a movie about Maui that has Moana in it, you can just have a movie about Moana that has Maui in it, and as a failsafe, stick it in the Disney Princess franchise. You will never be able to do that for a boy movie like you can a girl movie. And we have to remember that while they were trying to make Maui, Disney hadn't done theatrical animated sequels yet, even though they had a lot of franchises in live action, and obviously Pixar had franchises. The Disney Renaissance got direct-to-DVD sequels. I believe the very first one was Frozen 2. I don't know if they thought that Maui could be Disney's own equivalent to Cars or Toy Story, or that he would be popular enough to spark his own, I don't know, like Pirates of the Caribbean-y franchise or whatever, I guess. The only franchise that Disney had at that time was the Disney Princess franchise in that sense. So what do they do to the Maui movie? I have a whole Moana video planned for July, and so if you want to argue with me, you'll have to wait, but I have proof of this, and you can see it if you look hard enough. They butcher the script, they redistribute a lot of Maui moments to Moana, obviously they write some new stuff because it's Moana's story now, but in the end, you have these two different movies Frankenstein together. And even though they got away with it that time because of, I think, Lin-Manuel Miranda and the fact that people remember music or revisit songs more than scenes, despite how flawed Moana's story is as a result of doing that, technically it worked. Anyway, the boy movie has not really been attempted by Disney since Maui that we know of. Again, Gigantic is off dead in a ditch somewhere. So even though people are saying, oh, it's because of Elio and Strange World and all that stuff, and like, I don't think that that helped, I don't even think it's really about that at the end of the day. Disney isn't afraid of boys so much as they're afraid of not having a girl. And no one has more motivation to play it safe than Jared Bush. Which brings us to the Chief Creative Officer Battle Royale. A lot of people don't seem to know that Wish was basically a test for whether or not Jennifer Lee would keep her job. And she failed, so she got fired. Obviously, she's still working on Frozen and stuff, but from that position of COO, she was fired, and then they made Jared Bush COO. And now Hexed is the test for Jared Bush to keep his job. And let me be crystal clear, the villain in this story is Disney, not any individual in particular. I'm not saying he's like rubbing his hands together and going mwahaha about making all these choices. I don't think it's selfishness, I don't think it's solely self-preservation for him in particular to keep his job. Remember, looking at what happened to Pixar with the layoffs and everything, and the layoffs that have happened recently in other areas of Disney, it's more than his job that's on the line here, and he knows that. He is still responsible for the jobs of the people underneath him. And yes, the creative team for Hexed has also changed, but I think it would be naive to only believe all of this happened because the creative team changed, and now they just have a different story that they want to tell. Maybe that's true, but you cannot take that as the only reason when since Inside Out 2, there have been people saying that it is life or death! They have literally said that the real test for Jared Bush is actually Hexed. Seemingly, they're giving all the COOs the task of make something original and that has franchise potential and also makes money. I don't know if also is good and well written is part of the criteria there, but anyway, and if Hex fails, they're just gonna keep hiring and firing different COOs until someone strikes gold on something. Again, that does not mean that he personally has made every single decision. I don't think that he went in there making all of the shots TikTok friendly, for example. Even though, okay, apparently over at Pixar, they're saying no one can do anything without Pete Docter, so I don't know what's going on there. Apparently they need his approval for literally everything, so maybe it's anyway, I don't know. But I'm gonna generously believe that that is not what's happening over here. It's just that the mandates or the storytelling philosophy is what's trickling down. I don't think Jared Bush is there looking over everyone's shoulder, but I think that in theory, if something happened to Hex similar to what happened at Pixar, where there was this big emergency meeting and the mandate was once again, this is life or death, people would take it upon themselves to go, hey, wait a minute, if we make all these shots centered, it'll be TikTok friendly and that'll really help our marketing department and so on. Do you guys understand what I'm saying here? Rather than Jared Bush sitting there aha, we're gonna make the most generic thing possible. Instead, it's that everyone was told the same thing. It is life or death. And so now we're seeing people trying to do things like the shot composition that they think will lead them to guaranteed success. Making an animated movie is a team sport. No one individual can be blamed for everything. But at the same time, because of his position, he is the one technically responsible for leading them all into success and approving the work that everyone else is sending in, so to speak. And I can only speak for myself, but if I were in his position with my job on the line, I would not risk it on trying to make Disney's first boy movie in over a decade, not compared to that safer option. Especially if, and I'm not saying he thinks this, but I do, the movie is beyond saving. It's too late to address the criticism from Wish or respond to things that we've seen audiences gravitate to recently, like K-pop Demon Hunters or that DreamWorks trailer that came out recently. It's just impossible to respond that quickly. That's just the nature of the beast in a sense. If you're not being forward thinking, you're basically making the movie that people would have wanted 5 years ago. Unless obviously you're crunching everyone to get something more relevant in there now. All this to say, even if Disney and Pixar leadership don't think that a mother-daughter girl movie can sell well, because they have literally said that the past couple months, or they think internally the movie will be in trouble because it doesn't have a male duo character like Moana and Tangled, etc., which on my part is speculation, I feel like this is the lesser of two evils in a way. A movie that flops or breaks even with a female lead still has more product options than a movie that flops with a male one, because everything you sell to boys you can also sell to girls, but there are certain items or experiences, like say in the Disney parks, that parents will only buy for their girls. Technically, the Bibbidi Boppity Boutique does serve princes now and all of that sort of stuff, but what about the royalties on Disney Cruise Line? Or the princess gatherings? If it's a Marvel character, you can put them with Marvel Day at Sea. If it's a princess character, you can put them with the princesses. But if the male lead is neither and has no franchise of his own, and no franchise mates in the same way that the Disney princesses are franchise mates with each other, where's he gonna go? So my feeling is that they probably know that this movie is in the same amount of trouble as, say, on the Pixar side, Elio or Wish. But Wish at least did sell some Asha dresses, some Star plushies, some playsets, I'm sure. At At least with Elio, they argued that the rewrites were to make the story better, which I don't think that that's true either, but that's what they said. But we can't even pretend that any of this is in pursuit of making a better Disney movie. It has to be one of the most transparent Hail Mary plays we have seen from Disney animation. Yes, audiences may feel like something is off for every other reason that we already talked about, whether it's the centered vertical shots or the design or whatever, but I think deep down what we are really sensing is the desperation. We are going to feel that desperation in these lines and in these shots and in these jokes, because that's really what it all is. And Disney has been on the verge before, but this is very different from The Little Mermaid saving Disney from bankruptcy. This is an oversimplification, but I feel like it was, we need to prove to everyone that we still got it. We are trying to uphold the legacy, so we are going to do something very different, and if it fails, you know what? There's nothing else that we can do, because the audience just isn't responding to animation anymore. It was what we're doing is not working, so we need to take a big risk, because if we don't, we're gonna be fucked anyway. Like, we either do more of the same and fail, or we take this big risk, and yes, one of those outcomes is failure, but one of them is success. Do you guys know what I mean? Whereas this time, it's the opposite. Everyone is on the verge, and so they want to make the safest thing possible. Unlike The Little Mermaid saving Disney from bankruptcy, if this movie fails, the company goes on, it's just that everyone gets fired. So as much as we like to romanticize pressure and dire circumstance and, coming out of the gutter to make a masterpiece and all of that sort of stuff, this is not a kind of pressure that facilitates innovation. This is a kind of pressure that ends up stagnating everyone, because no one wants to be that person that got everyone fired. But we have to go deeper than just talking about Hexed, because the writing has been on the wall for a very long time. But for that, you'll have to check out these videos here. This has been Calxiyn caring way too much, and I hope now you care too.